Dear LLSP alumni and alumni, Assalamu alaikum and welcome to today's Lunch and Learn interview. Our guest today is Ms. Afshan Paarlberg. Ms. Paarlberg is a visiting assistant professor with the Indiana University Lilly Family School of Philanthropy. She's also pursuing her PhD in philanthropic studies. Her research, publications, and practice focus on nonprofits, philanthropy, Muslim Americans, and forced migration. Ms. Paarlberg holds a JD from the University of Houston Law Center. She also has a BA with honors in Middle Eastern Studies and a BBA in finance, both from the University of Texas at Austin. In 2020, she was an inaugural fellow with the Zakat Foundation Institute, obtaining a graduate certificate in Muslim philanthropic and humanitarian studies. Her legal experience includes designing and implementing access to justice legal projects, as well as governance, risk, and compliance measures for domestic and international nonprofits. And she also practiced immigration law for several years. Ms. Paarlberg is a social justice advocate. In 2008, before the UN Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, she co-authored and co-presented a report highlighting domestic discrimination faced by Muslims and Arab Americans. Ms. Paarlberg enjoys giving back to her communities. She serves as the president of a statewide refugee resettlement agency, Exodus Refugee Immigration, Inc. She's a board member of the Institute for Social Policy and Understanding and advisory board member to the Ethel York Museum of American Indians and Western Art and its Diversity Task Force. She further holds membership with the International Society of Third Sector Research, American Bar Association, National Association of Muslim Lawyers, and the Association of Nonprofit Organizations and Voluntary Action. Whew. Dear Afshan, I've asked you here today to give us both a macro and a micro view of the Muslim philanthropic sector in the US. Starting with the macro view, I know that this is a tall order, but why don't you start by telling me a bit about the Lilly Family School of Philanthropy and the Muslim Philanthropy Initiative? To be frank, I wouldn't have thought that there would be much interest in Indiana to focus on Muslims and Islam, but what do I know?
Well, assalamu alaikum, Sarah, and thank you so much for having me here today. I'm honored, and it's such a pleasure to be a guest and to spend this time with you. And I know you and I have had some great conversations about Muslim philanthropy before, so I'm excited to share a little bit about it today with our audiences. Philanthropy, giving, charity, these are time-old traditions and practices that carry through today, right? And in Islamic traditions, philanthropy is both formal and informal. We have zakat, sadaqah, and institutions like the waqf, right? So just starting at the top with the Indiana University Lilly Family School of Philanthropy, the mission of the school is to increase the understanding of philanthropy and improve its practice worldwide through critical inquiry, interdisciplinary research, teaching, training, and civic engagement. And the school, in fact, began as the Center on Philanthropy in 1987. It officially became a college around 2012 or 2013. And this really came from a growing recognition during the 1980s just about the need to better study, understand, and teach about the role of philanthropy in life and society, and to have better trained individuals in nonprofits. So today, the school offers several degrees, a bachelor's, a master's, a PhD. There's some exciting new development in the fall of 2023. We have a new professional doctorate for nonprofit leaders. The Lilly School is also home to the Fundraising School, which offers 22 professional development courses and customized training to nonprofit professionals, some of which are tailored and customized for Muslim American leaders. We're also home to the Women's Philanthropy Institute, which looks at the role of gender and giving. And we're also home to the Lake Institute on Faith and Giving, which looks at the relationship of faith and giving. And naturally, you may realize that the Muslim Philanthropy Initiative sits here within the Lake Institute on Faith and Giving. And it was officially established in 2017. So about 5 years after the launch of the school. You know, there's an understanding that philanthropy is central to the lives of Muslims, and MPI was brought along to use data-driven research to better understand this, right? Muslim philanthropy, as we'll get into maybe even a little bit today, has been under great scrutiny, right? By the media, by scholars, by the public, by the government, and it's also seen as a perceived solution to challenges, right? So there's this tension between suspicion and solutions, giving, love. What is Muslim philanthropy, right? So the Muslim nonprofit and philanthropic sector in this tension, right, is just seeing a dramatic growth in response to these challenges. And MPI uses empirical, high quality research to study this understudied area, right? It was this idea to help develop thought leadership, to frame conversations, to partner with the fundraising school to train philanthropic and nonprofit leaders in the area of Muslim philanthropy. And so it felt like this natural alignment between the two. And so just a little bit about what the Muslim Philanthropy Initiative does. In these short years, it's really just been doing some amazing and dynamic work. MPI hosts an annual symposium among global scholars and a biannual peer-reviewed journal of Muslim philanthropy and civil society. We also host ongoing small group convenings of Muslim American women philanthropists in conjunction with the Women's Philanthropy Institute. And one of these interesting projects that we have going on right now, my colleagues are currently in the final year of a 3-year community collaboration initiative. It's an innovative project that brings together Muslim American nonprofit organizations to solve a common problem, but then there's also a research component. There's other research projects that include understanding zakat and pluralism in contemporary society. We also do research not just on nonprofits, but on individuals. And last year, some of you may have seen a new study that came out with the Muslim American Giving 2021. The report was conducted, and the survey was conducted in 2020. And one of the amazing findings that we walked away with was Muslim Americans on average during 2020 gave more to charity than non-Muslims. So there's this ability to really uncover and use research to understand something that we haven't previously studied in this way before. And the Ihsan Standard, which we'll talk a little bit more about today, is a project within MPI, and it's dedicated.
I want to interrupt right now because you're in full flow, but something that you said causes me to think before we get to the Ihsan Standard, which I definitely want to spend some time on, and that is, you've just said that the Muslim Philanthropy Initiative is a relatively new area within the Lake School. And so I'm just wondering, was this idea to start studying patterns of Muslim philanthropy, was that an idea the Lake School suddenly realized that, wait a minute, we're studying Christian and Jewish and however many other sort of subgroups, but suddenly the light bulb went on and they're like, oh, we should be looking at Muslim philanthropy as well? Or was it brought to their attention by a Muslim saying, yoo-hoo, we're over here also, and we do a lot of philanthropy? So I'm just wondering whether it was the school that went out and decided they needed to study Muslim philanthropy, or whether the reality of Muslim philanthropy was brought home to them?
Yeah, I love that question, Sarah. And I'm sorry, all of a sudden I've got this light bulb flickering on top of me. I might turn it off in a second. But yeah, so the Lake Institute studies more than just Christianity and Judaism. But interestingly, one of the school alums, Sharik Siddiqui, has his JD, got his PhD from the Lilly School, and was doing work and studying Muslim philanthropy as a part of his dissertation, and had established the Center on Muslim Philanthropy, a standalone 501c3. And so it was through this conversation and dialogue that there was this emergence of understanding that there could be an opportunity to go more in depth into something that was already recognized within the Institute, and to really just have this opportunity to go deeper into something that has this high level of scrutiny, is under-researched, and is already a part of this Institute, and can be a really rich opportunity to move forward.
Oh, well, thank you for clarifying. So I guess we can say it was both an inside and an outside job.
Absolutely.
So, having had the macro view, why don't we now move to the micro view, and more specifically, what is the Ihsan standard? What major issues is it intended to address, and how are you getting the word out about it?
Yeah, well, part of it is being here today and you helping us to, get the word out about the project. But the Ihsan standard is one of the projects within MPI, right? And it's dedicated to the research and the capacity building of Muslim American nonprofits and lawyers. And it's really aimed at this idea of leadership excellence in community-based nonprofits, and as well as just unearthing practices and challenges that we know exist within the Muslim American nonprofit sector. But rather than using anecdotal or assumptions to really inform what we're doing, we want to use research and use high quality, data-driven research to really inform, to better understand the sector, and to inform our conversations, right? Muslim Americans, like other faith-based communities, they rely upon the nonprofit sector to promote public good, right? To sustain and build religious identity, to run health clinics, schools, human service organizations, arts institutions. And the Muslim American nonprofit subsector is relatively young, diverse, and quickly expanding. But overall, our impression is that it's under-resourced, right? And so, it really is, we operate through the Muslim Philanthropy Initiative, but we're generously funded by the Muslim Legal Fund of America. And I'd like to share just a little bit about the way in which this project came to be, right? So the Muslim Philanthropy Initiative is a research center, and we conduct research with individuals and organizations. And so naturally, there's this desire to continue to bring in opportunities that give us a better understanding of what organizations look like. And through ongoing conversations with MLFA, they had piloted a program in 2016 in which they conducted 135 legal screenings with nonprofit organizations, Muslim American nonprofit organizations. And there was this finding and recognition that there was a weakness in governance, risk, and compliance measures. And so there was this mutual desire, right, to kind of learn through and develop from what we learned in this pilot program and combine it with research, collaboration. And so I would say over the course of the last year, the Ihsan standard has really gone through a deliberative process of having many different conversations and reflections with legal, community, researcher input, trying to just imagine what the role of this project could be and what's the best way forward for reflecting excellence in organizational practices within the current environment that we're in, and how do we help nonprofits and leaders get there. So we've got 3 just target communities that we work with. And first, we work with nonprofit and community leaders. So we provide free legal screenings. I'll say free because they've been generously underwritten by our funder. And we provide these to nonprofits. So we go through a governance, risk, and compliance evaluation. We provide a scorecard, a targeted training, and provide just an awareness of what organizational health and situation an organization is in. And we provide access to referrals and resources so that if there is a need to cure an issue, they can go out and do that. We also do nonprofit law and leadership workshops. We also focus on research. We're an academic center, and we are currently conducting our first survey to just better understand what's happening behind the scenes. How are decisions being made? What does diversity mean and look like? How does Islam inform the practices and decisions within the institution, right? And so we're doing this right now. We're actually engaging with that. And then we're targeting lawyers who are community leaders and tasked with looking at these types of issues. And so we're doing continuing legal education, developing a referral network for nonprofits, and also accepting pro bono hours to help conduct these legal screenings across jurisdictions and across the country. For us, it's about quality, sustainability, investing in good organizational health so that organizations can better meet mission, promote community confidence, better steward resources, and support ethical decision-making and transparency in Muslim American nonprofits.
So I suppose you can say the Ahsan standard is both a standard, but it's also a tool. It's kind of a diagnostic tool that links organizations that use the Ahsan standards to trainings and information that helps them to get better at what they're doing. Is that a fair way of kind of summing up what the Ahsan standard is about, while generating a lot of important data for you guys to continue to crunch, of course?
Yeah, absolutely. And the information is intended to be public information. So it's public research that can inform all of us, right? It's about a collaborative ecosystem where these are informing each other. It's about developing a strong foundation of support and knowledge to build together, right? And using these to inform each other. But yeah, you've captured it beautifully.
Yeah. So, Ahsan, I was wondering, do you have any idea how many Muslim charities are registered in the US? I mean, of course, mosques are not required to register as 501c3 operating charities, but if the issue is good governance, then I would assume that you consider them part of the community you're seeking to address. Family foundations who are funding operating charities. And, I just wonder what kind of database you already have on the Muslim philanthropic sector in America.
It's a great question. So just to give you a big overview, in the United States, there's about 1.8 million nonprofits. And just for comparison perspectives, from existing research of what we've pieced together, we believe there's about 7,000 or more Muslim nonprofits. And while that might feel small in comparison when we compare these two numbers, it's important to realize that Muslim Americans and the nonprofit sector has shown considerable growth. It's also Muslim Americans are considered the most ethnically diverse faith-based group. And it's also highly scrutinized. And I think there's just a lot of lessons that can be learned from understanding this. But we're also still working out on mapping the exact size. We have a team member of ours that engages in machine learning. And that's something that we're trying to use to better help map out the sector. But I'll also say there's some difficulties that even come with the idea of defining what is a Muslim charity. It's kind of an ongoing conversation in our team because, how do we define Muslim nonprofit? And is it because the mission is related to Islam? Is it because the members of the board are Muslim? Is it because the needs of Muslims are served? And who gets to decide that, right?
Is the funding primarily from Muslim sources?
Yeah, there's just a lot of ways, and we've left it for there to be room to self-define that. But at the end of the day, we're trying to kind of understand what that means so that we can come up with a better framework. And we do provide, as you mentioned, services to mosques, whether or not they've chosen to register, and whether or not, there is a singular best practice. We try to work with organizations where they are, and we try to see where they are in their life cycle to understand what the best practices would be for them and their organization. But absolutely, we consider them within our scope of services.
And Muslim family foundations, I'm pretty sure there must be a sizable number of those, because essentially, as you mentioned earlier on, the Waqf, which is basically an Islamic charitable family foundation, is an established category in the Muslim mind. So have you been able to sort through or create a database of Muslim family foundations?
We do not have one exclusively for that, but I love the idea. And if I might say, maybe it's something that we can kind of think about and reflect on in our research as we're kind of mapping this out. I think it's a really interesting question and something that would be really interesting to think about and research further.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, we've kind of danced around this issue a little bit, talking about the American Muslim community being highly scrutinized. And coming back to this issue of zakah being a requirement for practicing Muslims, my question is that, well, I suppose I should first preface by saying that ever since 9/11, it's become increasingly difficult for Muslims and Muslim charities in the US to be able to distribute zakah or sadaqah to Muslim individuals and communities outside the US. And is this a matter of concern for the Muslim Philanthropy Initiative? And if it is, what are you planning to do about it? And I'm thinking in particular about all the terrorist financing and anti-money laundering provisions.
Sarah, I think this is a really important question. We just recently commemorated the 20th anniversary of September 11th, and yet it was a national tragedy on so many levels, right? Lives lost and mourned, but also for Muslim Americans, that had an additional layer of tragedy in which there were hate crimes against those that were perceived to be Muslim or Muslim, and not to mention the hurdles that you've just identified for Muslim charities in the aftermath of 9/11. But I think there's a couple of things I just want to step back and frame for us. And one is that, Islam in America is not new. So September 11th felt like a defining moment for so many, but, Islam's presence dates back to at least when enslaved Africans were brought here, and perhaps even earlier. And if we go back and evaluate the absence of charitable public practices, or the muted ways in which charitable giving, was an indication of the difficulties even in that time of practicing Muslim philanthropy, right? And rather than just in the absence of Islam, right? And I'm also thinking, in our not so distant past, right, during World War II, when there was the internment and incarceration of Japanese Americans, the rounding up of Japanese American leaders, especially those that were in community-based organizations and leadership positions. And there was this discriminatory law and practice that had this heightened suspicion, right? And I think those are opportunities for us to learn and reflect from those before us and around us, right? So Muslim Americans are vulnerable perhaps in this moment. Muslim charities have faced situations of secret surveillance, charity raids, freezing of assets, these additional restrictions in terms of international finance. And that is something we evaluate in our screenings. If it's a charity that is conducting international work, we want them to be familiar, knowledgeable, and understanding of what that framework looks like. Absolutely.
And the dangers they may be courting by trying to do this work.
Yeah, but we also want to do it from a place of investing in awareness and knowledge and dialogue and best practices. So not just feeding into this chilling factor that might be, making people feel like it's not something they can't do at all, but having an informed decision about what that framework looks like, what the risks are. And that's what we want to equip leaders with when we're doing these screenings, right? They can make an educated decision and understanding of what those risks are before moving forward and what those best practices would look like in that type of situation, whether it's international, whether it's domestic, and understanding what that landscape looks like, right? But we've learned lessons from those around us, from those before us. And I think there's a way forward where we're investing in education and informed decision making to be able to make a good decision about whether an organization wants to partake in that type of work or not, and what those risks are associated with it. And so that's where we see the Ihsan standard fitting in, right? It's about helping to promote education and informed decision making in difficult situations and in risky situations, and bringing awareness to things that maybe people aren't always thinking about or understanding the full depth of.
I just wonder if this isn't an opportunity for an institution as well regarded, and it's hard to think of anything more foursquare American than a school that's established in Indiana, trying to also educate lawmakers about the chilling effect of a lot of the legislation since 2001 on the Muslim philanthropic sector. And, the kind of stuff that has made life very difficult for people working in the Muslim charitable sector without necessarily being particularly beneficial. So I would ask that the Lilly School consider trying to educate some American lawmakers as well. That would be very helpful, I think, to the sector.
Yeah, and we welcome the any ideas that can strengthen what is meant to be, for a community, right, and a collaborative effort. I will just point out that despite all of this happening, right, even in our recent Muslim Giving report, we did find that Muslim Americans are still giving and giving generously. Giving can mean many things, right? In Muslim philanthropy, it's not just with our dollars, but it can be with our time, with our smile, with, making a sacrifice, right? Kind of, it has a bigger meaning than just in dollars of giving, but even in just that measure, right? We saw that they were very generous. And so I think there's a bigger narrative here that kind of comes in together with understanding what that environment looks like and what the generosity of Muslims look like, and how can we kind of use that to inform the way forward.
Well, this has been a most enlightening conversation. Before we wind down, is there anything else that you'd like to say to our viewers? And how can they find out more about the Ihsan standard?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for this conversation today. It was enlightening for me as well. I always walk away from our conversations thinking about something new. I will say, we are welcoming clients and we are welcoming research participants. So we offer free legal screenings. They're confidential, they're free. We'd love to work with your organization, whether you're already in best practices, whether you're just wanting to kind of understand where you are at this point in time. It can be a really valuable experience. We also are inviting people to participate in research so that we can continue as a community to learn more about the Muslim nonprofit sector, and together we can do that. So We have a QR code up here on the screen. Feel free to check us out on our landing page, send us an email, be in touch. We'd love to hear from you, whether it's for one of those services or whether you have an idea after thinking about what we've talked about today and just want to reach out.
Yeah, and if anybody watching this has an idea that they want to start their own nonprofit, it'd be good for you to get it right from the beginning instead of having to go back and reverse engineer it. So if you've got an idea for a nonprofit, operating charity, get in touch with the Afshan Standard people. Well, I can't say enough how much I've learned from this. This has been a great discussion. I really hope anybody watching this has learned as well, and that they feel confident that they can get help and advice by contacting the, using the QR code to contact you and see what kind of, stuff off this very broad menu of services that they can get that will be useful to them. So yeah, I just want to thank you again.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And thank you to everyone watching.
I'm sure we'll be in touch.